Thank you for tuning into our podcast. We are coming to you from Holyoke, Massachusetts. I am your host, Carrie, and joining me is Holyoke's very own local historian and creator of the Historical Tours of Greater Holyoke, Robert Coleman. And he offers both public and private tours, as well as presentations of the local canal systems, reservoirs, cemeteries, and churches, as well as various parks and streets in Holyoke, South Hadley, and Chicopee, Mass. Now you actually lead these tours and give these presentations yourself, is that correct?
Yes, and this presentation led onto a display at the library about 3 years ago.
And so today Robert will be educating us on the South Hadley in the Great War book. So tell us about the book.
The book must have got coming about by fraternal groups around South Hadley and grants from individuals and groups. And they wrote it so that it explained the war and some of the infantry groups that went from South Hadley and had a lot of solid men out to especially France. The Great War signifies World War I within Europe. Now this book is in the Silent History Room. It's also on the internet a bit. And I've tried to expand upon it. I'll tell you how later on. And at some point, I developed it, I think it was 4 years ago, I developed it into a display. And instead of just taking the pictures and put them in this glass case, I looked up the birth dates and places, the death dates and places, and the burial location for every man. They were given in the book, but I wasn't satisfied that they're probably correct. This book, I believe, was written in 1932. And so I had a great advantage of the internet, and a lot of genealogical information has come around. And so I wanted to check the work. And I did, and I found a lot of discrepancies. So I was able to write up on my webpage and then have display in the Silent Public Library about 4 years ago. And it stayed up for, I believe, 4 months. And a lot of people appreciated that. Remember the 100th year anniversary of the war was in 1918. So I had this ready by 1918, displayed 1919. So it was very effective, and I wouldn't mind someday doing a presentation at the library on this topic.
So what have you done to expand the reach of the book?
Okay, what I've done for each of the men, remember the book is just a book, but since it's out of print and it's past the time where photographs are still in their legal right. What I could do, and what I did do, is take each of the man's name, find out the correct birth date, place, death date, place, and get their pictures scanned nicely, and get a scan of the description page within the book scanned, and then find the burial place. And I made a chart on my webpage, holyokecanaltours.org, and each man has all this data, and I checked all those 5 pieces of information for every one of the men that is inside the book. Now, that's 8 different men, and I believe my data is now correct. And so, sure, you can read the book, but also use my website because it'll give you the up-to-date, and it'll give you a nice clear scan if you're not able to get to the book.
So quickly before we continue with the rest of the interview, just to fill our listeners in, if you want to find out more information or want to sign up for any of his various tours, you can check out his website at holyokecanaltour.org. And there he has both videos of the various stops along each tour and also past and present photos of the historical sites throughout as well. And if you're interested in setting up a private tour, you can email him directly at bobcat4214, and they are perfect for fun, educational outdoor activities for the whole family or for your group parties, especially those special occasions and get-togethers. And they are also good just for getting outdoors for the day. So getting back to our interview, tell us about the Crichton family?
Yes, they came from Great Britain to Canada, and they were in Canada when in 1914 World War I started. If they were old enough, they entered as privates into World War I, but the family moved from Canada out to South Hadley. And so during the World War One, they were on the beginning of North Main Street of South Hadley. Now, all the boys had by the end got the age of 18. They were able to enter the war. There was 4 boys, no girls in the family, and 2 of the boys of that family ended up dying. Robert Crichton died 11th of May 1917 in France, and William Crichton died 2nd of January 1917 in France. One of the sons died soon thereafter. He came back with the flu, and he died in South Hadley. Another son died within a couple of years. So all 4 sons have died, and you could probably contribute all the deaths to the actions in World War One. Quite the story. Now these are 4 people not in the book South Hadley and the Great War, because that book defined that the men had to be South Hadley residents and enroll into the war from South Hadley sources. And the Crichton family didn't do that. They were British citizens that happened to move from Canada into South Hadley. So they're a little outside the definition, but I'm glad I was able to find out this story. All 4 of these sons have their name in the South Hadley Falls Cemetery. 2 of them are buried there, and 2 are buried in France. Now, this I'm trying to do in the way that I've got the other 8 men from South Hadley, find their birth dates and places, and death dates and places. I found some of their burials, of course, and I want to get pictures, but I haven't been able to do that so far. Of course, to do it is going to be a hard venture, but hopefully I'll develop that.
Now, tell us about the memorial in the South Hadley Public Library.
Well, the citizens of South Hadley developed a memorial plaque with all 8 of the men who died during the course of the war, First World War. And that used to be in Town Hall of South Hadley. And about 5 years ago, Town Hall said they didn't want it anymore. And could the library display it? And the library agreed, of course. They'd love to have that. And so it's now in the very back, 2nd floor of the South Hadley Public Library. And it's a compliment and a compliment to the book and to the citizens that they did a great job at honoring their men. Now let me list out the men for you, and I'll give you some idea where they're buried. All right, so the 8 men are Alva Avery, buried in Arlington National Cemetery of the United States, died in 1918, as almost all these men did. Then there's Francis Dampier, he's buried in France. There's Francis Gaylord, he's buried in the Evergreen Cemetery of South Hadley. There's Leon McGuire, buried in the St. Rose Cemetery of South Hadley. James Moody, buried in the South Hadley Falls Cemetery. Cyrus Wallace, buried in France. Benjamin White, buried in Evergreen Cemetery of South Hadley. And Harry Williams, buried in the Asheville Cemetery of Massachusetts. Now, one of those men, I believe it's Benjamin White, I believe it's Cyrus Wallace, was a British citizen, but he was living in South Hadley at the time, so I believe he entered from South Hadley into the British Army, and while the others entered through the American Army. So I'm glad that you can listen to the podcast, and find my webpage and go through some of these men. They click to the pictures of each of the men and click the description of their lives. In most cases, click to a Find a Grave memorial picture of each of the men. Thank you very much for listening to me.
And thank you, Robert, for educating us on your tours. And we want to thank our listeners for tuning in. And you can also tune into a large selection of our other podcasts and much more at his website. Again, that's holyokecanaltour.org. And again, you can email him directly for private tours or to inquire about anything else at bobcat4214, capital B, at yahoo.com. And be sure to keep an eye out for his upcoming 2024 season tours and more as they become available. Thank you for tuning in.